Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another session of the August Diet. SENCO Diet? August Diet, whatever. It's the only one for the August Diet. So we are doing a session today on profiling that serves pupils, not paperwork. Although I have to admit, when I looked at that title, I kept thinking of prisons. And I have no idea why. I'm obviously watching too many true crime series on Netflix at the moment. Let me find the present button. It is that one there. Yes, it has flicked me over. Okay, so profiling that serves pupils, not paperwork. This is the chef's special for our autumn menu, or our August menu, I should say. And our August menu was all about plans, profiles, provisions, passports, anything that begins with a P, including post-it notes and paper napkins. It's all to do with those ways that we gather information about our students and then try to share it amongst the stakeholders that need that information. And in this particular case, I'm going to look at 3 types of profiles that you might use. So these are not about mapping provisions. This is about sharing information about students. And I know some of you will have been thinking about this over the summer holiday. Some of you have been putting off this task. So even if you don't take one of these as a complete idea, but you take bits and pieces from it and come up with your own key from it, it'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so let's move it on. First of all, I want to talk about a couple of the bits and pieces that sit around it. Why does it often fail? Very often, I've seen some amazing profiles and plans and passports in the past, and they look beautiful, and they contain absolutely nothing whatsoever. It's a bit like word salad. It's a bit of waffle sitting there, and it doesn't really mean anything. Or there is so much waffle sitting on there that it is difficult to extract what it is actually trying to say. They are also pieces of paper that no one reads. Let's face it, we've all been there. We've spent hours and hours producing something for staff, and I can remember doing it, only for them to show us up at parents' evening and say to the parents, oh, I didn't know they were on the SEN register. Oh, they've got a plan. Oh, I didn't know they got one of those. Even though they actually signed to say, oh, yes, I've taken that piece of paper off you, Abigail. Thank you very much for it. Oh, yes, I will read it. I'll read it now in front of you. Okay, wonderful. They don't actually read it. It happens. We know it happens. It may genuinely forget them. I know I forget things that I've read. Sometimes I just think they don't read them, though. And sometimes our pieces of paper turn into great big long strategy sheets that say things like use visual support, but don't actually define what that actually means or why we're using it. And you know that I'm quite into this idea of self-determination theory, the idea around autonomy and competence and relatedness. And I believe staff do have the autonomy to choose when to use a visual support. They should have that option. They do have the competence, they do know how to use visual support, but unless they can relate that to the child and absolutely understand fundamentally why it needs to be used, it won't get used. So that's why just putting use visual supports is possibly not helpful. Equally so, embedding it in a paragraph of text will also not work. The bit I've put over on the right-hand side there, my little catchphrase for this, if you like, is it's time to move from compliance to connection. So it's all very well and good having the bits of paper. So let's face it, the big O and SLT like pieces of paper, and that's compliance. But if there's no connection to those pieces of paper, that is all they are. They are pieces of paper. Pops. I'm going to call them pops from now on, and I'm going to pop some balloons. So, like I say, we've all been there, we've all done it, we've created these beautiful folders, we've shared all of this information. And yeah, okay, I talk about it being on pieces of paper, but we could be talking digital paper here, bits that are on the screen. And to be fair, people are even worse at reading it on screen than they are a physical piece of paper. But either method, we're still talking about the same thing. We're talking about that way of sharing information that moves it from just compliance, filling it in, to actual connection, giving people something that they need. So, what do we have? Otter trying to join my session today. What makes a good profile? Well, it captures everything in one place. So it's going to be concise. It's going to be something that has actionable information. It's going to help prevent the overwhelm of teachers. I always think of the poor music teacher in secondary schools, if I'm honest, because very often there's only one of them, a bit like there's only one SENCO. And very often that means that every child in the school may well come through them. Okay, year 10 and 11 might not be taking music, but at least in Key Stage 3, and there are 3 biggest year groups, every child is going to be going through that department at some point during the week. And that means they've got to know every single student's SEN status, pupil premium status, looked after status, all of those other bits of information that we need to know about students. And they perhaps only see them once a week, maybe even once a fortnight. So we're asking an awful lot of some members of staff. You could say the same about the PE department, because they see everybody, but that's generally split amongst more than just one member of staff. It's always the music department that comes to my head. Maybe it's because I taught music at some point. So we know that our staff are going to be overwhelmed. We know that they need that information. They need it in a format that they can access it quickly and easily in a straightforward manner. But it needs to be something that they're going to want to read, and not going to be something that gets buried. It needs to be shared, it needs to be used, and it needs to be reviewed. I absolutely detest passports, and I detest them because they very, very, very rarely have a review date on them. And I have been into too many schools, or I've seen the back end of software, bearing in mind what I used to have access to, where passports were written for students when they entered the school, whether that's in reception class, year 1, year 3, year 7, doesn't really matter. And they've never been reviewed and changed. And we moan enough about EHCPs not being updated. We are doing our students a fundamental disservice if we are not updating passports as well. And I know the reason why it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen partly because there isn't a review date on it going, review me, you must review me. But also because it's, well, things really haven't changed an awful lot. They're still the same kid now that they were last year. But actually, are they? Year 3 to year 6, you cannot claim that that is the same child. Year 7 to year 11, you cannot claim that they haven't changed in some way. So passports have to be reviewed. They have to be shared. They can't just be something that sit in our Google Drive in a nice tidy folder, or if you've printed them out in a nice lever arch sitting on your shelf. They've got to be used. They've got to be something that we share with everybody, and that everybody who has access to it is using it. Do you know what? I'd love to walk into a school and see a crumpled up piece of paper with scribbles all over it, rather than these rather fantastic, pristine documents tucked in polyplastic wallets that you can't scribble on because the polyplastic wallet's in the way. I just love it when I see something that's annotated with updates, information, key bits. I think that's so important. Whatever we're using also has to be useful for teachers, but you may well be wanting to make it multi-purpose. So maybe it has to be useful for your teaching assistants. Maybe it needs to be useful for your families. Maybe you want to be able to use it with external stakeholders as well. Maybe you want to be able to use it for your ECNAs, your EHC applications. You know, it's got to be something that's workable. And if it's not workable, if it could be 5 pages long. But if you're not going to fill in those 5 pages every time and update those 5 pages or the relevant sections each time, or you are only going to be using one section of it and somebody else is only going to be using one section of it, then it starts to become a bit stagnant. It starts to become something that people won't use. And down at the bottom there, that it doesn't duplicate an EHCP or an external report. So I see a lot of people who sit and write EHCPs in what they call teacher language. I get it. I absolutely get and understand why we are doing that. We're trying to reduce our workload from them reading something that is very often poorly written into something they can apply in their classroom. Now, if it is really translating it into something they can apply in the classroom, fine, fair enough, go ahead. On the other hand, if it is just copying and pasting the information from the EHCP or an external report and dumping it onto a format that's got your school crest at the top of it, you are wasting your time. You are making work for yourself. And yes, okay, it looks pretty and it looks consistent, but it really doesn't help anybody. I'm getting quite passionate about this today. I'm sorry. It's probably because I've just spent a couple of hours repeating something that could have been done right in the first place. And if it had been done right in the first place, I wouldn't have had to have spent that couple of hours doing it. And I kind of resent those few hours I've just lost. So this rings home for me. Why am I going to copy and paste from the HCP? No point. Just give them the HCP in the first place. On the other hand, if you're translating it, and very often we do have to do that, fair enough. You are turning it into something different. You are turning it into a working document. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to 3 different profiles, what you want to call them. I'm going to call them profiles for today, profiling tools. I'm going to introduce you to Spot, Stars and Spice. If you came to Sensible 25, you would have heard me speak about Spice. I've used it a few times. You may well know what a spot analysis is, although we've got a slight tweak on the use of language. And some of you will have used star analysis in the past. I've got an S on the end of it as well. I'm going to make it really, really clear that you can pick and choose from them. You can pick elements from each different one. I like them because they're acronyms, and I quite like an acronym. It kind of reminds me what it is I'm supposed to be doing. I like mnemonics. You don't have to use the same one with every student. So for some students, you may need a spot analysis. For some students, you might need a spice analysis, and that's absolutely fine. The only thing I would say is if you are using different formats, is to make it clear to your staff in your school why you are using 3 different formats, for example. So why do some students have a spot profile and some students have a spice profile? And you may well justify it with, a spot profile is used for students who have cognition and learning difficulties. Our STARS profile is used for students who are there for SEMH purposes, and our SPICE profile is used for other students on the SEN register for other reasons. So that might be your justification, that might be your reason. You might have an entirely different reason. It might be that you use a SPICE analysis for early years, Key Stage 1, and then you move it into a spot and stars analysis when you know the child a little bit better in Key Stage 2. Again, entirely up to you. Pick and choose what you want from this. It is not, you've got to eat the whole lot. I'm going back to my wonderful menu and food analogies here. So, a spot overview. Spot tends to be used when you are looking to develop an intervention, when you are looking at planning things, when you are perhaps preparing for a multi-agency meeting. I actually talked about spots a couple of weeks back. It will be a couple of weeks now because we're at the end of the summer holidays. No, it was before the summer holidays. And I was introducing somebody to it, and you just saw this light bulb come on. They'd just had to exclude a student, a temporary exclusion, a suspension from school. And they were really struggling with what they were going to do next. And I talked about SPOT, which stands for strengths, problem areas, opportunities for change, and then threats to the success. And they were like, oh, I'm going to email my head teacher now because I actually think we could do this in the reintegration meeting and look at where these things sit. And it was really nice for me because I got those chills that go up and down your arms, the goosebumps, because I could see they'd suddenly realised and put into context how they could use this. As I say, you can use it for any purpose. It's kind of like, it's the step you take before you start going into more detail with things. We used to do them with giant A1 sheets pinned around the staff room. So one of them was headed up with strengths, one of them headed up with problem areas, one of them headed up with the opportunities, and one headed up with threats. And this is in secondary school, we'd choose a student, and then we'd have this solution circle, if you like, problem-focused solution circle. And every member of staff who knew that student would go around and with a nice marker pen, they would write underneath those headings. And if they couldn't contribute something, that was fine. But if they saw what other people were adding, sometimes it triggered something for them to go, oh, yeah, I've just remembered that. You've just put on their seating plan. And I've just remembered that if I sit them to the left of me in the classroom, they concentrate so much better than they do when they're sat to the right of me. It can be really silly little things like that that get added to these. And it's a great community activity to get everybody involved. So if you're looking for an inset day activity that you're planning for, I don't know, Monday next week, today is Thursday, this is a good one. That student in school that everybody knows for whatever reason that is going to be an issue next year. Put a spot up. Piece of paper around the room, get everybody to go around and contribute to it. It is an amazing tool for getting that kind of information. The link to this in the business context is, of course, a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, but we call this the SPOT because SWOT just makes you sound all nerdy. And I think the real key to this is we're saying, okay, we've got a problem, but here are the strengths. And you'll always find somebody who can find a strength, even if it's only their shirt is tucked in at 9 a.m. every morning. You identify the opportunities for change, but you're also identifying where that might go wrong. You're not saying it will go wrong, but you're saying it might go wrong here. This is why our plan might not work. So what you start to do is you start to unpick, I've thrown everything at this child. I've thrown every resource I've got at them. Why is it not working? And you start to unpick that before you actually put things in place. So you're preempting it almost. And the ultimate aim would be to look at those threats to success and try and mitigate as many of them as possible before you actually develop anything. So like I say, it's really great for planning. It's great for reviews. So if you're ever stuck at an annual review with trying to sort out new targets or anything like that, it's useful for that. Really useful for exclusions, really useful if you're doing a referral for a student, and especially useful as, certainly these days as a secondary SENCO, very often we don't know the students. We haven't got the capacity to go out and visit all of the students who are on our SEN register. I talk to some schools where they've got 50, 60, 70 students within the HCP, which is probably taking up most of their time, and another 300 on SEN support. There is no way you can know 370 odd kids intensely, deeply, to be able to provide all that information. So this is a great way of sharing that and getting that information. Like I say, really good for making those referrals too. What does it give you then? It gives you something a bit more than just that one-page profile, because it's capturing all of those factors. It's capturing the environment. It's capturing especially if you do it with different staff, it's capturing what happens at lunchtime with lunchtime supervisors. It's capturing what's happening with the TA and what's happening with the teacher. It's capturing what's happening across different subjects. And a simple profile might miss those things, but this captures it. It brings it all together, and you can start to see patterns in there. And that really does help us when it comes to planning for our students. It's much clearer than a catch-all report, because if I sent out an email that said, can you give me some information about Fred? It's like, he turns up to my lesson, he doesn't sit down, and he messes about, and he usually forgets his pen. Staff get trapped into listing all the negatives if you ask them for feedback, whereas the spot would be quite good at getting them to focus in on very specific things. Without saying what you want those specific things to do, because the last thing we want to do is blinker everybody. We don't want to go, tell me about Fred's habits when it comes to sitting down, because then they will automatically only think about him sitting down and not tell you other things that could be useful. And it also gives a bit of a shared language. We all understand what a strength is. We all understand what a problem area could be. We all understand what an opportunity is. In other words, what are we going to change? And we all understand what threats are. We understand that things might crop up that are going to cause issues. So once we've got that, even parents will understand that language, and it gives us ability to have a discussion that, yes, okay, I'm using some word salad, I'm using some wonderful SEN acronyms again, but spaghetti soup. But we're sharing something that parents can access, external professionals can access, we can access. School business manager walks in on it, they will know what a SWOT analysis is. It's not that difficult for them to swap the W for a P. They will understand it, and it gives us that common language that we can work from. And like I say, it's only 4 boxes. It's really straightforward. It's great at that assess stage of assess, plan, do, review as well. So those kids who are just coming onto your radar and you're thinking, I'm not sure, do they belong on my SEN register? Don't they belong on my SEN register? Let's fill one of these in. Let's have a look. And if you've not got very much information on there, if people aren't able to say an awful lot in those areas that are problems and in the areas that are threats, then actually maybe they're not going to be somebody who's high on our radar for referring to whatever service. Maybe there's another 30 students who come ahead of them in that list. In the ideal world, we'd refer everybody at that point of needing to do it. But we all know there's going to be some form of hierarchy in there, even if it's alphabetical. Okay. What about stars then? So that was spot. Let's have a look at stars. So stars is when you need something that staff can action immediately and implement it. And there's 2 different ways of using stars. So one, you can use it for profiling, which is what we're talking about today. And the other one is when you use it for behaviour. And that's where I first came across a star analysis. It was when I was looking at behaviour analysis. And that's where you look at situations, triggers, action, and the result of that action. Okay, so I'm going to go through those in I'll go through those in a little bit more detail for you, just to explain it to you. So if we're going to use it for profiling, very, very similar to our SPOT analysis, we're looking for strengths, we're looking for triggers. What is it that makes our student start to struggle with something? Whether that's social and emotional skill, whether it's a cognitive and learning skill, what is it that triggers something that isn't a strength? So what is their trigger? What's the action that they take? So if you can imagine a student who is sat in your lesson and they're quite happily working away, and then they come across a word they can't spell, so they become distracted, they stop working, they put their pen down, and they don't do any more work for the rest of the lesson. Their strength is they understood the task. We know that because they started the task. Their trigger was coming across a spelling they couldn't produce. Their action was to put their pen down, to avoid it. What resource would we need to prevent this? Provide them with a dictionary, provide them with the spelling, provide them with some prompts. Okay, let them use a magic line, whatever. So we're giving them the resource. And how would we know we've been successful? They write the spelling and they carry on working, Abigail. Nice, straightforward example there. So we've gone from their strength, we've gone to their trigger, what sets something off, the action that they took, or the action, you can do it, the actions that we're going to take, but actually our actions tend to more be resources. What are the resources we need, or what do we need to do? And then how do we know if it's been successful? So we're almost working our way towards a SMART target, in a sense, without turning it into a SMART target. SMART targets get a bit woolly at times. So this one's quite good for that. Okay. That's using it for profiling, so a cognition and learning need, social and emotional need. You can also use it for behaviour situations. And let's face it, we do have behaviour situations. And this is where we can start to unpick things. So we start with the same thing. What's the situation we're in? We're sitting in the classroom, we're delivering a lesson, students have been asked to write a passage about whatever. What's the trigger? Students have been asked to write a passage about something. What's the student's action? Picked a chair up and threw it across the room. Why did they do that? What was the result of this? I sent them out of the room. So they couldn't do it. Their action was to throw the chair. Therefore, they got sent out of the room, which means they now no longer need to do it. Okay, what support do we need to put in place to stop that happening in the future? So that's why we call it stars analysis and not a star analysis. In a star analysis, you are looking back on previous behaviours and just going, here's the situation, here was the trigger, here was the action, here was the result of that action. In other words, what did they get out of that action? In this one, we add the S at the end. What support do we need to prevent it happening again? Okay, so situation, asking 2-piece writing, trigger, struggling with a piece of writing, action, they're going to throw the chair. I've got a couple of things that I could do here. Number 1, I am not going to throw them out of the classroom. Number 2, perhaps I should remove the chair. Probably wouldn't go down very well unless it's Tigger. Number 3, maybe I need to provide them with support for the writing. Maybe I need to give them some scaffolding, some modelling, some prompting, some cueing. Maybe I need to tune them into it a little bit more. Maybe I need to look for those signs that things are not on track before it escalates to the point of them throwing the chair. So that's what we use it in the sense of behaviour for. And again, it can be really, really useful when we're trying to unpick things with students. If you're working with older students, it can be useful for them to do this as well. So if we used to fill in behaviour incident forms, but if you've got a student and you're trying to unpick what happened, actually going back, yeah, they know what their action was and what the result of that action was. Usually it's they've done something that we didn't want them to do and they're being punished for it. But that punishment actually sometimes means they've got away with not doing the thing they were trying to avoid in the first place, which is why they've done it. So they'd actually rather take the detention or being sent out of the room than producing the piece of work. And we see that a lot in students who have cognitive and learning difficulties or finding the emotional demand far too high. So sitting them down, having that conversation with them, if they're cognitively able to do that and emotionally regulated at that point in time, looking at the situation, looking at the trigger, looking at their actions, looking at what the result of their actions were. In other words, what did other people do because of it? How did you get your own way? Usually, and then what support would you need to prevent it getting from the trigger to that action and to that particular result? Okay, so a couple of places we might use this. Strategy handovers between staff. So if you're trying to structure a handover from one member of staff who's been handling a student really well all year, and you're handing them over to a new teacher, and that new teacher is like, oh, I don't really know how to manage this. A stars analysis can be quite good for that. The typical things that would set the student off, writing them down. What's the triggers? What's the action? What's the result that we're trying to avoid? And what support has that person been using to avoid it? Can be useful for training teaching assistants. So anybody who's managed to recruit a few new ones for the autumn term, well done. What's your secret? But if you have got any new staff coming in, it can be really useful for giving them scenarios and examples of, okay, here's a typical thing you might face on a Wednesday afternoon when it's windy. It's windy outside. That's what made me say that. Typical thing that's happening. How are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? How are you not going to handle it? What are you not going to do? That can be a really good way of using it. A behaviour plan without requiring a full individual behaviour plan, or IBP, whatever you call them in your area. Sometimes we don't need a great big long wiffly-waffly document, again, that nobody reads. We just need this simple piece of information that tells us something. If we've got a supply teacher coming in and we know that they're going to be covering that class, and we know we've got a tricky character in there, perhaps providing them with that little bit of information as a stars. You know, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. This will be the result because this is what they're trying to get out of you. This is what you're going to do instead. Okay. And then it can be used at parent-teacher conferences. So very often we have that situation where parents are saying, oh, I cannot get them to do their homework when they come in. Okay, let's sit down. Let's go through this. What's the situation? They're coming home from school and they're hungry and they need to get changed and they're tired and we're going out for swimming at 7 o'clock tonight, but they need to do the maths homework and they're reading. Okay, what's the trigger? I've just asked them to do the homework. Okay, what's the action? Well, they've torn the homework up and they've thrown it in the bin. Fish it out quickly. What's the result of that? Well, I couldn't really do anything apart from cancel swimming but they don't like swimming anyway, so it didn't really make much difference to them. Oh, great. So not only did they get out doing homework, they got out swimming as well. Brilliant. What support could we put in place for them to prevent this? So instead of saying, do your homework, perhaps you could say, can I have a look at your homework? And then you say, oh, that's a tricky question there. Do you have any idea how to start that one? And we start to tease that out with our parents as well. So we've got that STARS analysis that we're doing with them to support the home side of things. You might have multiple STARS sheets, so you might have to do it multiple times for different scenarios, different situations. So one student might have different reactions to different things depending who the teacher is and the way that teacher responds to things. But actually, it's still quite digestible. It's still only 5 tiny bits of information and not this great big long wiffly waffly document, that's been my word of the day, that people struggle to extract information from. Okay, SPICE. Now, SPICE is an American term, and they actually use I to stand for intellect, and I don't, because I don't particularly like this idea of pinning intellect on students. Cognition, fair enough, but intellect it's just one of those awkward words, isn't it? Like quite a lot of American terminology. So SPICE stands for social, physical, information processing, communication, and emotional. And if any of you have seen me talk about this before, you will know I have changed this over the years, because I used to have social, physical, information processing, cognition, and emotional. And actually, I felt that cognition kind of comes under the information processing, and communication is becoming such a prevalent issue for a lot of our students that it is important to recognise it separately within here. So a SPICE profile, we've got these 5 aspects, and they come from the idea of child development. So in child development, good old red book if you've got kids, we're looking at these 5 strands, and there is this kind of developmental pathway, and it generally is fairly linear. We expect them to start making eye contact at so many months of age. We expect them to start making sounds and saying mama, papa. At a certain age, we expect them to start standing up and cruising the furniture at a certain age. So we've got this kind of profile that goes up, but it doesn't just stop when they turn 5 and you've lost the red book. It kind of carries on. And although those lines at that point don't stay quite so straight, they will kind of peak off from each other, and some things go faster at one point and then slow back down again, and some of them plateau for a bit. They do still keep improving. There's still that trajectory that's going up the page. They're flying like doves into the sky. So that's where the idea of this comes from. But we know that there are some students where we have a profile, when you plot it out, if you plotted out 5 bar chart graphs, that would be quite spiky. And the example I always use for this is the kid who goes to line up for break time, and they're pushing and shoving in the queue, and they are trying to do something, but they're using their physical force to do it because they're actually quite well built. So they're the chunky 5-year-old in that early years class. They're the kid who's on the playground who has just snatched the football off the team that was playing and run off with it. And you're thinking, why? Just why? And the answer is probably, whilst they are physically well developed, they've got a spike, they lack social skills, or they lack the communication skills. So they're pushing and they're shoving because they don't have that social understanding of giving people body space, or they don't have the communication skills to say, I want to play with the ball for 5 minutes. So they shove somebody out of the way instead. And that's just a really simple example of where you see that spike. We've got the physical, but we don't have the social and communication in the same kind of alignment with it. And then you can always apply that to older children. So if we talk about adultification, where we're talking about teenagers who are physically more mature, who are kind of looked at as being older than they actually are and expected to behave in a way that is not commensurate with their actual age, or possibly with their cognitive age, because we have to remember we're talking our SEN students here. So whilst they might be 14 years old and they look like they're 21, they might only have a cognitive processing age of 7. So we've got quite a higgledy-piggledy set of spikes going on there. So just really useful for thinking about our students in that way. And we're only talking, again, 5 pieces of information. So our social, peer relationships, can they work in groups, their understanding their interactions, their physical, so their motor skills, gross and fine motor skills, any sensory needs, any physical accessibility requirements, so that might be toileting as well. Information processing, so I'm kind of throwing all my cognitive stuff in there. So their learning style, yes, I know it's been debunked, but we all still have a preference, don't care what you say. And we all need to learn in different ways. I am acknowledging that, but we will still always resort to going to the one that we prefer. So we have learning preferences. Our cognitive patterns, our processes of thinking, and our attention and executive functioning. Our communication skills, so that receptive, receiving it, and our expressive, giving it out language. Our non-verbal communication, I'm very handsy today, and our literacy skills. And then our emotional side of things, so our regulation, our emotional literacy, our ability to explain how we're feeling, and then our mental health and well-being. And we need to plot these. And if we plot them, you get this, I've done it as a ring donut there, but if you plotted it as a bar chart, you kind of see these strange peaks and dips in things, and it really does help you to pick things out for students. The way I usually do it, I usually get TAs do this one for me, so I get them to try and identify aspects within those 5 areas, so social aspects, physical, information, communication, emotional, and then I will get them to identify how that impacts on their lesson. So in terms of the social skills, they might actually be very, very social. So it could be a student with Down syndrome. Maybe they have got all of those social skills. They're absolutely fantastic at it. And what we've got in our curriculum side of it is they are able to participate in talk-based lessons. They have a good peer group. They share equipment. They can participate in group activities. They are making good progress in whatever lesson. But when it comes to physical, we know that they tend to have more difficulties there. So maybe we've got lots of things listed out in the physical for the aspects of this child, and then we've got struggles to eat food without spilling it. Maybe they have toileting issues at some point during the day. Maybe they fall asleep. Maybe they have high sensory needs, as in they make a lot of noise but don't like a lot of noise around them. All of those things. They kind of plot it out like that, and then they look at it and go, okay, have we got more strengths than we have weaknesses here? Have we got more difficulties than we have strengths? And they start to plot, which kind of way does it list out. So it goes against how many bullet points did I manage to put there against how many bullet points did I manage to put below the line, if you like. A couple of examples of how you could use it. So like I say, it's a structured framework. It's great for documenting complex needs over time. Because remember, I said it's developmental. So whilst we might be developmentally behind in our physical area, for example, maybe they have a growth spurt over the summer, and actually that physicality, instead of being the small kid in the class who's been babied by everybody because their communication skills were slightly behind as well, so if they come across quite immature and they need babying, if they shoot up over the summer, what you'll notice is that physical peak will go up, but the communication one becomes even more apparent, because now we've got a child who looks their age, but definitely isn't acting their age. So let's say complex needs over time, you can plot that out, that developmental pathway. Helps you to create some comprehensive case studies. Again, it's just a really useful way of just gathering that information, profiling your students. Helps you to guide any provision mapping, any design you want to do there. So it can make you look at your provision maps and go, oh my goodness, I've got loads and loads of interventions for information processing, and I've got quite a few for communication, speech and language, but I have got nothing in there for social skills because the EHCP said they've got to work one-to-one. That doesn't allow me to do group work, and it doesn't allow me to build peer relationships. And I really need to go back and rewrite that EHCP with the local authority. You know where I'm going with that one. Or maybe we're lacking in our physical skills. Maybe we're lacking in some of those ideas there. We're not putting in place those fine motor skills or gross motor skills. We're not helping them to develop their grip on things. Maybe we're just throwing a laptop at them and saying, use a laptop, but actually they can't coordinate their fingers to hit the keys. Okay, so it helps us there too. And then it helps to coordinate across teams, of course, because it can be a shared language, again, between our education professionals, our health professionals, our social care professionals, EHC. And it helps us to coordinate everything. And I think because it is common language, everybody knows what social means. We all know what physical means. Information processing, it doesn't have a negative connotation like intellect does. Communication skills, emotional skills, they're all everyday language, which means it's accessible by everybody. It doesn't take very much brain power to sit and work out what needs to go in each box and what we're actually talking about if we saw one of those headings. So again, we get this reduced communication barrier, especially with parents, with external individuals that we're working with. And it can be really useful for your EHC preparation and for any APDR stuff that you want to do. So this tool, which tool and when, is kind of what I'm saying here. Spot is best if you want a strategic overview, and your audience is generally you, the SLT, and it links to a plan, or it might link to some EHCP evidence if you want to take it further. STARS is good for daily strategies. What are we going to put in place to prevent this happening? So that could be useful for your teachers, could be useful for your TAs, and if you want to link it to terminology you might already be using, they're your passports and your support plans. It feeds into those if you want to use those instead. And then SPICE, it's that better, more holistic, full needs picture. And it's useful for you, it's useful for your education psychology team. If you're trying to give them this, this pen portrait of a student, SPICE is great for doing that. Speech language therapist would appreciate it before they're meeting a student for the first time. And it links back to your provision maps and your referrals. So although each one can stand alone, although you don't need a plan and a spot and a star and a passport and a SPICE and a provision map, I'm not asking you to do 6 things. You don't need all of those things. But if you are using all those things over on the right-hand side, and you know that they're not very good, or you know that the information in there needs updating, or you know that they're not filled into the best of their capacity, maybe the spot, stars and SPICE will help you with that. And if it is being dictated to you by your multi-academy trust saying you must use this format and you must fill this in, and they've given you a passport or pro forma or plan or whatever it's called, okay, giving you a P, and they're telling you you've got to fill that in, that's fine. But how are you going to get your information to fill it in? And I think if you used a spot, stars or a SPICE, it would help you to gather some of that information to put it into the P that they have given you. So they can work independently, but they can complement each other. Start with one that best suits your need. And if you necessarily expand it, you don't need one for, don't need all of them for every student. But if you're putting a student on the SEN register, you probably need at least one of them. Or if you're trying to replace your plans, your passports, your profiles, your provisions, then you might want to look at the S's instead of the P's. That just sounded really dodgy. Anyway, let's just carry on for a moment. That bottom sentence, though, is actually really important. Consider your own time constraints. who's going to be using it, because that will help you decide which one to use, and that effective profiling is about quality over quantity. None of these should be more than 1 page. So, the one title I do agree with is a 1-page profile. They should not be going over onto 3, 4, 5 pages, even for a complex needs student. And the reason for that is, once it becomes 3, 4, 5 pages, nobody's going to read it. They're not going to be able to retain that information. So it's better to have a single page, yes, it might be size 8 font, with the key information on it in one place. I've put there, don't just store it, use it. Again, we're really good at it. We can create it, but are we actually sharing it with everybody? So many schools I have worked with that have a certain piece of software, and only the SENCO uses it. It's like, why? You do realise that if you shared it with your teaching staff, they'd have access to that information. Oh yeah, but we know they won't log into it, so I print them all off for them and hand them to them. Okay, and what do they do with that piece of paper you've handed to them? I think they use it to prop the door open. They probably do, to be honest. If you've got it, you need to use it, and your staff need to be seen to be using it. So, spot there, you could use it in a staff meeting, planning session. Great, inset day, gather everybody around, get them filling in that chart. It helps you to allocate your resources, and it helps you to do a bit of priority setting as well, because if you've got a list of 10 students and you've put up these charts and you've got people filling them in, and you've got one that is absolutely jam-packed filled with information, that's probably a priority student for this year, maybe. Stars help your staff to act. So we've got planning going on, great, got priority students. Stars actually turn it from something about the student into something we're going to do about the student. So something we're going to do. So you could turn them into laminated guides. They could be used by students. You could turn them into something staff can refer to. You might even realise that there are some generic trends coming out with particular situations and triggers, and actually you could come up with some generic stars that is used as a staff training. So if we see this situation and we see this trigger and it's usually resulting in this action, this is what we're going to do. This will be our strategy. And the consistency with that is amazing, because students then will know every time I'm going to use throwing the chair again. Every time they throw the chair across the classroom, they're not going to get the detention and get out of doing the work. Such and such is going to happen instead, whatever that is. And then SPICE helps you build understanding. So we've got our planning, we've got action, and then we've got understanding. So it really helps to dive in there and unpick why. Why is this happening, as opposed to what is happening? STARS is very much a what-based thing. So we're seeing something. What is it we are seeing? SPICE is, why are we seeing it? And what are we going to do about it? So like I say, it's just a useful way of doing it. So there is a doggy bag for today lurking somewhere, which I'm sure I will find out where, somewhere at some point. It is information on spots, stars and SPICE that you can use, that you will kind of find out how to use them. They're like recipe cards, is the best way of describing them, reminding you how you can actually use them. And there's a which tool when decision guide, which you've seen, if I just go back, that one there, that reminds you when you use spot, when you use stars, when you use SPICE, if you're not really sure which one to use. They've been designed for you that you can adapt them your own school. They're not adaptable templates as such. You'll know I don't necessarily agree with giving you a template to do something, because at the end of the day, this is my academic work, if you like, my intellectual property. If you want to create it, you need to spend the time creating it for yourself, or I'm going to charge you 50 odd quid for a single sheet of paper, because that's what intellectual property is worth. So if you want to do it, you're going to take my ideas and you're going to interpret them for yourselves, create your own Word document, whatever it is, from those resources to design it into something. I've given you examples in those documents that are usable whatever phase you're in, so primary, secondary, through to specialist provision, through to FE, early years. I've tried to be as generic as possible. You might want to tailor it for your specific phase, hence I'm not giving it to you in a particular format. And access to those resources, you have permission to adapt and share them and create that sustainable approach to pupil profiling in your setting. Okay. That one there is just reminding you, the profiling isn't about the form, it isn't about making it look pretty, it isn't about putting the trust logo at the top of it. It's about clarity and connection. What do the member of staff need to know, and how are we going to help them to connect to that child, or relate to that child, if I go back to self-determination language. Stop writing it for the folder and start profiling for the pupil. If that's what I had to say to you, my takeaway phrase, stop writing something so it looks pretty in the folder or on the piece of paper. Start writing and profiling for the pupil. What's the information that we actually really need here? And it's not about the profile at the end of the day. It's about the outcome for the pupil. So I am, the more I do this, the more I realise how many hours I have wasted across my career typing sentences, retyping sentences, typing them again, going back, improving them, putting a different synonym in, when actually I could have just written a 3-word bullet point and got the same message across, probably a bit better. So it's not about how much we're writing in there and how pretty and how glossy it looks. It's about what is that information that's there and does it improve the outcome for the student? And that's, at the end of the day, that's the important thing. Is this actually going to have an impact for your students? Now you can go back through this and go, spot, no, not going to have an impact for my students. Stars, nah, pointless. Spice, I already know my developmental pathways, my students, they're pointless, don't need them. Fine, fair enough, don't use them. That's where I'm going with that. If it's not of use to you, don't use it. However, if you are struggling, or if you are being forced down that path where you have got to create something, they may well help you to come up with some ideas. Try and make them visible, not invisible, because of course, if they're invisible, they're just not in action. Remember, Ofsted, when they go on that walk, they want to see paper in practice. I've just handed them this profile, whatever it is you've used. I don't care what you use, but if you've just handed them a profile and they walk into the classroom and none of it is in place, so we're seeing a situation, a trigger, and an action, a result, and the strategies are just not there, then what's the point in writing it? So make sure it's visible and it's embedded in practice. And what you will then end up with is the title of this presentation, which is Paperwork that Serves the Pupils rather than the Systems. And that's actually what we want. We do have to have some kind of accountability and paperwork that sits behind this. Because at the end of the day, if something happens to you and the only place that information is stored is in your head, then there is going to be a problem. That's why we need the paperwork. And I always have to tell myself that, because I am the worst person at putting off doing paperwork. But the paperwork is there to serve the pupils, not the system. It's there so that if something happens to me and I can't come to work for the next 3 weeks, somebody else can pick the piece of paper up and go, oh, this is what we do. That's why it exists. And it's why it's so important that it is easily understood with common language that everybody can access and use, whether it's your SEN admin, your SLT, your SEN governor, TA, parent, lunchtime supervisor, student themselves. Common language is the way forward with this. There you go. So I'm going to scoot through my slides. Look at those, skimming all the way through. Profiling that serves pupils, not paperwork. There was your August Diet Chef's Special. Chop, 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 chop. I really should be wearing that chef's hat. I've got to order one. Really must order one. You can hide the grey hair at the same time. So that was your August special. Next week is our chef's special for September. and it is all to do with digital and AI solutions, and it's focusing on whether we're actually making good use of what we already have in schools or whether we're not making good use of that. So our September diet is our digital toolkits. You know that I'm into the technology, and I think that's important that we start the term with that one. Certainly because most of you will be too busy to kind of engage with material in September. So it's like one that can sit on the back burner and you can dip back into at any point. So do come and join me next Thursday for that webinar. And we then have 2 further webinars for you on the following 2 Thursdays. One which is AI, friend, foe, or frustration, and one which is digital tool or digital fool, which is again talking about our technology and are we being, are we using our digital tools, or are we being digital fools with them and not making the best possible use out of it? So 3 webinars across September focused on that, plus a webinar towards the end of September that is not with me, but is with Thomas, our legal expert, who is now working for Geldard's solicitors, and he's going to be doing a Q&A. Do not miss that Q&A. And those of you who are secondary and FE, if you were not aware, the new JCQ guidance came out 2 or 3 days ago now, with some quite significant changes in there that will be adding to your workload. Sorry to ruin the end of your holidays. And they come into effect on the 1st of September, so just bear that in mind. And we have got a session with Nick Late on the 2nd of October. We haven't got him in September, we've got him in October. It is a free session. I know a lot of them have got him for September, but they are paid sessions. We've got him for free in October on the 2nd, and he will be doing a very quick update for you, but he will also do a Q&A as well. So if you have got any questions to ask him about that new guidance, you've got a month to get reading through it, come up with those questions, and come and attend that session on the 2nd of November to find out all about those new JCQ access arrangements. Thank you to everybody for joining me this evening, and I hope you've enjoyed the end of your holidays, or if you're in Leicestershire, I hope you enjoyed your first 2 weeks back at work. And I've managed to finish 3 minutes ahead of time. I can't see the questions, so I'm just going to go with, I shall end it there, shall I? Ping back to me. I should have actually put that last bit onto me at the end, but I forgot. Take care and have fun, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye. Now I've got to find the button again.